Welcome, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us. This is our first of our free webinars for this year. For those of you who don't know, we do these every month, and we've been doing that for a year and a half, I guess, all through this COVID time. And we take the opportunity to share some frameworks. We often share a tool. We explain, share some stories of how we've seen these things work, some application. And really our interest is in building capability out there for people to think and act collaboratively. That's a passion of ours, and this is our way of sharing our thinking and our practice with the community out there. So I, as usual, have some slides. So I'm going to share a screen. John, you'll keep letting people.
Yep, we'll do.
Joining us. I'll just share some slides and we'll work through those. So give me just a second to get that sorted. Right, so that should be fine. So today I'd like to, we're going to step through this thing we're talking about as 3 steps to authentic collaboration. Now, in a way, this is a new way to look at framework that's been around for a while. We've been talking collaboration for years. We've got our own ways of thinking about that. And this is a different window into these concepts, I guess. And really, we're drawing on our client experiences. We're drawing on what they've shared with us and what we've seen about what works and where this is most practical and the key doing bits of the framework. So yeah, we're pretty excited to be talking about this in this way. It feels right to us. So today we'll just introduce these 3 steps, and over the next few webinars we'll step through them each in a bit more detail.
Yeah, these have just emerged, I guess, from working with clients around the framework, and we found that these have been the key areas that people have grabbed onto and found some real value out of. So it sort of crystallises, okay, here's 3 things that just look at that gives people something tangible to grab hold of.
Yeah, so we'll be talking about sharing the problem, sharing the direction, and sharing the actions. All will become clearer as we go. So let's dive straight in, sharing the problem. And, at one level, this is 101. This is really obvious, isn't it? We know that it's important to get some sense of what the problem is, and the elephant story is a classic. We've probably all heard that. But I think in our experience, while we all sort of pay lip service to the sense of that we need to stop and understand the problem, in practice, it's really hard for us all to resist that urge to get on and solve without being sure that actually we do know what the problem is. The number of times it's become clear that everyone in the room has a different understanding. It's pretty standard practice for us 50 people in the room to tackle something complex. So what do you think the problem is? Do you all know? Yes, yes, yes. Okay, well, so write it down on a bit of paper and stick it on the wall. And we get 50 different responses. And it's quite clear that everyone in that room believes they know what the problem is and that other people think like them. But in practice, we're all seeing it differently. And a time where this really crystallized for me is working. This happened quite some years ago on a very complex bit of planning in a local community, a council project. And we had people in the room, and I haven't got my prop, but you don't need it. This guy, Michael, we spent 5 days in the room exploring these planning questions that the town was grappling with. And Michael had this glass and he held it up an end on so we could just see the end. And he said, I set up this advocacy group and I've been writing letters to the paper for a year about this. And now that I've done this for a few days, I was only really seeing this in 2 dimensions. He showed the bottom of the glass. And he said, now I've been here and I've heard from all these different experts and I've heard from council, I've heard from the neighbours and the planning people. I can see that it's got a whole shape and a series of dimensions that I really didn't understand. And he said, you know what, I can't go back to that group that I set up and that I've been pounding council over the head as for the last year. And, you know, what really struck me was that Michael, for the past year, thought he knew what the problem was. Not only did he think he knew what the problem was, he thought he knew what the answer was. You know, a strong advocate for a position. But it was only when we got in the room and really chewed on it together that we saw it differently. And it wasn't just Michael. Everyone in the room understood this thing differently. And I think we never take the time to do that, and yet it is so important. You can't solve it if you're all thinking differently.
And I think the other thing, Stuart, about you mentioned about sharing the problem, it stops you jumping to solution. Because I think, as you said, Michael had the answer as well. Most of us go into an interaction having the answer. That often blinds us to the perspectives about the problem. So we tend to just sit there. So I think pulling people back to share the problem and emphasising that it is about what we're seeing, how we're seeing the situation, not about what we think we need to do. It constrains that leap to solution that we probably find is the biggest challenge when people step into a collaborative process.
Yeah. And we do that, of course, through listening, through asking, not by telling, through listening, through sharing, through, you know, exploring together, and through not having that answer. So well, I'm interested if anyone would like to share a little bit of your perspective and experience. Does that ring true? Does that resonate? What's it like to sit with the problem and to avoid rushing? I wonder if anyone's got an angle or a story to share. Feel free. Don't forget to turn your mic on. What's it like in your place?
And I'll suggest that it can be tough going, Stuart, because I think people want to move to solution rather than defining the problem.
Mm-hmm. And how does that manifest, David? Like, what happens? Yeah, what does it look like?
I think you made the comment that you know, what do we see, not what we need to do, and so I think people keep defaulting to what we need to do rather than hang on a minute, what are we seeing, hearing, feeling? We tend to go, what do we want to do?
Yeah. And it's the frustration of, why can't we just get on and solve it? That's what I see, and that's what I experience. And of course, if I see the group, you know, someone who facilitates, I see a group that's frustrated and wants to get on and solve. Well, the easiest thing for me to do is to say, all right, let's get on and solve. When perhaps the most useful thing for me to do is to say, we need to sit here.
I think the consequence of that rush to solution is that you may well not solve the problem. I mean, so the consequence is fairly high, is that you'll come up with a solution that actually doesn't work, particularly when faced with complex situations. It's sitting with that discomfort around the clarity on the dilemma that allows you to come up with solutions that are much more likely to deliver. So I think it's about delivering outcomes. That's the key here. So a key first step is, if you want to get outcomes, don't rush to the solution, but spend the time in that sharing the problem.
Yeah, and I think on the positive, when it works well, it's enlightening and liberating.
That's funny. I just was talking to a client this last hour, and he used the word liberating. That was actually the word he used. We do need to keep moving. We've got a good bit to cover, but I think this has been a key learning for me, at least, that the dilemma is not just the dilemma. You know, we focus on the projects, how to deliver health services in, you know, how to deliver my health project, how to clean up the water in my river, how to plan this town. There's always a project, a question, and that's where we all focus. But in fact, the dilemma, that dilemma sits always within a bigger dilemma, a more contextual dilemma, a more systemic dilemma. And often these dilemmas are the bits we just ignore, we forget to look at, we don't understand, we don't get to the surface. Dilemmas like... Yeah,
I think it can stop getting outcomes. I had a good example in Queensland where the health group were working on a big issue, and it was about the department and the stakeholders were talking about this issue of nurse ratios, and the hospitals had been asked to provide data about the ratios, how many nurses, what the workload was. And this guy who was pulling all this stuff together said, oh, well, they seem to be not telling us the truth. We can't get the right data out of the hospitals. And he sort of realised it really wasn't about nurse ratios, it was about trust. Nobody trusted each other. So the dilemma was, how do you trust each other enough that we can solve this nurse ratio or resourcing issue? It was until they acknowledged that that was part of the dilemma, was the fact that you actually had very poor trust. So people weren't sharing the information, so you could never solve the problem because you didn't know what was going on. Couldn't even get clarity on the problem because nobody would share it. It was nothing to do with the data. It was all to do with who would trust who.
Yeah. And I had the experience just last week talking to a client who's kind of leading a big international complex technical expert group on a project in Bangladesh. And they're sitting here in Wollongong, where I am. And I was in their office talking to them, and they're worried about, how to get this team going. And it emerged that the only 3 women on the whole international team were those 3 in the room. And it was very clear to them that gender politics, gender power, cultural differences working across genders was part of the dilemma. But it was probably only going to be visible to them, not visible to all the other blokes on the team around the world. So getting this stuff out, the part of their dilemma as a project team is, how do we work across gender? And that never comes out. They always focus on, how do we manage that land question, which is what this was. So the dilemma is always deeper, always richer, and always worth sitting with and exploring more deeply. As Einstein said, if we're trying to solve a problem, it pays to understand what the problem is before rushing to solve it. Right. We can come back, and we try and leave some time for questions at the end of these. So, if you got me, that would be fine. I want to move on to this second step. So we know what the problem is. I think a really important second collaborative step is to sort of mirror that process, looking to the future. So if that's our dilemma, what does good look like? How would we know when we got there that we had got there? What are the characteristics of solved or resolved or fixed or sorted or delivered? Definitely not what is the solution, because we're not there yet, but it's how would we know that we had a solution? And doing that together, it's exactly like the dilemma conversation, but sort of from a different angle. What would great look like from all perspectives? And what would great look like around how do we work across our gender issues, as well as how do we solve the problem?
I think the important thing is that while it's an aim, how we know, it's also a check. So that if you're going to try some things, come up with solutions, it's something against which you can evaluate, well, are we moving in the right direction? Are we seeing more of the things we want and less of the things we don't want? So important as that way of knowing that we're actually moving in the right direction, because otherwise you can put lots of solutions in, but no confidence that it's actually going to tackle the complexity that we've looked at.
Yeah, I think some people say at this point that we've got a vision, what's this about? We already have a vision, and that's true. And in some ways, this is a bit of a visionary thing to be doing. But the key thing, as John says, is that this is about application, not just inspiration. You've got to actually use this idea. We've got this goal, this light on the hill, we call it. We're shooting for it, we're aiming in that direction, but we have to use that idea all the time to test whether we are getting there. We can't just sit and forget, because that's not helpful. It's a really important collaborative conversation all the time, is are we still heading in that direction, and how do we know? And is what we've just talked about as an action, is that going to take us in that direction, and how would we know? So it's always coming back to that, what's our dilemma, where are we trying to get to, and is what we're trying to do today, where does that sit, and is it likely to get us there?
And I think probably, as you said, David, there's probably a challenge in this one too, because there's a tendency to write the desired direction as the answer. And so this is also pulling people back from, okay, that might be an answer, but what is that answer getting us towards? So it's about, again, holding people back from the solution to more what success that solutions may take us to.
So just to sort of wrap up this step, it's about, the authentically collaborative bit of this is doing it together. It's the most important piece of this for me, is not so much what it is, our picture of a light on the hill, but that we all own it and we all share a bit of a sense of what that means, that distant aspiration that we may never get to in this complex and challenging project, but we all share an idea that wouldn't it be fabulous if that's where we got. And we use it as our guide constantly. We've got to make decisions. The conversation I just had with my client, he's responsible for strategic planning in a big multinational organization. So his question to me was, how do I get ownership? How do I get buy-in of the strategic plan? And so my encouragement to him was to think about, how would you know what ownership and buy-in look like, and what can you try that's going to get you there? So it's less problem solving and more thinking about the ideal and working it out as you go, and using that ideal to check the solutions as you go. Is this solution taking us where we thought we wanted to get to? All right. So lastly, share the action. So we've got a shared dilemma, a shared problem. We've got a shared aspiration or a shared direction, that light on the hill. We know where we are with our problem. We know where we would like to be. And of course, the real opportunity in any collaboration is, how do we get from here to there? And this, again, is an opportunity to avoid rushing to the solutions. And it's perhaps hardest of all to do that here. And it's more about small steps, things that we can try. And I wonder, I'll just pose another question here. In your place, is it normal practice to look for the small steps, the exploratory actions, or is it practice to look for the answer, roll out the strategy, implement the deliverable to deliver the answer? What's it like in your place? I'm sure you all have experience of this.
David put something in the chat, generally to look for the answer, the in capitals.
Certainly that would gel with my experience, and it's gel with my own personal, I've had to practice not doing that. Anyone else? And feel free to drop it into chat. Any other observations?
I'm happy to talk a little bit if no one else is going to talk. My name's Kelly Brooks. I'm at Melbourne Water. A couple of the big projects I've worked on, there is that exploratory space, but there still is very much that jumping to solutions. We do have practices we know we'd like to do, but when you're working with external organisations, it's really hard to get that broader context going. And when you were talking about the sort of the vision and the aspiration stuff, I think that's really hard because we're operating in such complexity. There's always a higher vision, but there's all this visioning that happens, but where's that overarching view, particularly of Melbourne and our city and what our customers and our community wants to achieve? We tend to all go off and do this disparate visioning. And my concern is everyone's solving different problems. And it's easy to say that you all come together, but we just don't do it well because no one no one values and recognises the time and effort that needs to go in up front. It just continually doesn't happen. That's my view.
Yes, well, I wish I had the easy solution to that dilemma, Kelly. And look, I think what you've just talked about there is a great example of the broader dilemmas in which the project sits. It's not just how do we provide water, to our customers. It's how do we do that in a regime, in a system where there's not a lot of alignment across agencies, across the players, and so that is part of the dilemma.
And there's politics and power and everything else that gets in the way. So there's all constraints that sit around that complexity as well that you're working within. Yeah,
and so I think, it's a challenging one to solve, but surfacing that, naming that as part of the dilemma is a really important first step. And then I guess you can see where it goes from there. But the critical piece to me is recognising, acknowledging the challenge, and not pretending perhaps that you can resolve all of that, but everything you do is in that context of that dilemma. And perhaps the light on the hill, the obvious element of that, an obvious element would be, alignment. There is some alignment. Now, do we know how to generate alignment? No. But is this little thing we're doing likely to improve or destroy alignment across the agencies?
I think the COVID, I think, has been a good learning for all of us if we pay attention to it, about the importance in a complex situation, hugely constrained, unknowing, that you've just got to try stuff. And you can see what's happened both in Australia and overseas is lots of different people trying different stuff. Lots of argument is that's the wrong way, but in the end it's worked in some areas, it hasn't in others, and everybody's sort of kept doing stuff to move towards that light on the hill, which is, I guess, getting us out of this. So there's no answers, and this a good example of lots of little actions happening in all different places and moving us in the right direction, hopefully.
So this is really, this is the difference that we really wanted to emphasize here. If we're talking about our 3-step framework and we're talking about sharing the actions, the real difference about doing that in an authentically collaborative space is recognizing that we're tackling something complex together. None of us probably has a full grasp on what the answers or the solutions could be. Not even sure there is a single answer or solution. But again, the very words my client used this morning in this context was, this is liberating and frees me up from being paralyzed, because rather than being paralyzed by the challenge and the complexity and the difficulty, it's about, well, I'm going to just do something. I'm going to take a step. I'm going to try this. I'm going to try that. And doing that together, we are going to just try stuff. That's the real collaborative essence here, is creating things that we can try together, learning together, reflecting on our light on the hill together. Are we closer or further away? And what do we need to repeat or do more of or extend?
I think our experience, the reality is also that you're in a bit of a constrained environment most times. So you have to just do it where you can. I mean, it's sometimes not possible. The boss expects the answer, you've got to run with it. But it's bringing the thinking in that says we're learning our way forward. It's not the answer that will work. It's something we're going to try and hopefully it'll work, and it's going to move us in the right direction. Bhakti's had a hand up. Bhakti, do you just want a question, comment?
Yes, good morning. I'm sorry I couldn't join in time. So I will request later for you to please summarize I was there when the third point was being discussed. Yeah. So I'm dialing from India, as you know, and I'm actually here in this Ladakh. It's one of the highest places in India to actually conduct a training workshop on community participation in designing and implementing rural drinking water supply scheme. It's actually one of India's very large drinking water programs. And one good thing is, in principle, they've got all the right things in place where there is community ownership that's been emphasized. And at the training, of course, I'm learning about the realities that the engineers are facing is they are under a lot of pressure to deliver the network in each village. and they haven't had the opportunity to actually, do a proper consultation or involvement of the community, although they have had to do some, very technical input type things. So the whole training had to be improvised about, so what do we do from here on, where they've already got the project, tendered out. But then we also discovered that there are a lot of more things that could be done in terms of, communicating and involving them, because community ownership, if that doesn't happen in a very deliberate way, then it can fail. The network can fail, and that's something, it's been. So that's made me think, because it's such a large program and it's one of the first states. So as facilitators of, someone to help the other party to navigate this collaboration process, I think that's something I'm finding we'll have to figure our way out based on each of the, talking to engineers, we are talking to the set of different states. But yeah, if there is any experience of others or
you're just dropping out a tad there now, Bhakti, but nice to hear from you from the top of the world. So I'm happy to stay on after this and have a bit of a chat. But what I take from that is, you've got this complex dilemma. It's not only technical engineering about water supply, but it's community and social. It's how to build trust and ownership and acceptance of this new way. And if you're doing it across different regions, plenty of opportunities, it would seem, to be trying stuff. Safe to fail, safe to learn, small steps. What can we try here in our facilitation, in our communication that might work? What did you learn last time? So, it sounds like that's
I think it reflects what Michelle put in chat. It's the one about learning our way forward approach, particularly in a time of lots of ambiguity. So I think it reflects that too.
Yeah. And to me, that's a critical mindset shift when we are collaborators. I hear myself saying this all the time. It's to step back from problem solvers to learners, because we're often working in a really complex space where you can probably never fix the problem. It's, there's always elements which continue to be issues, and just because we fix it here doesn't mean we fix it over there. So our task is to be really good learners together, and to try things and to keep improving and keep tweaking, keep learning. So it's a learning mindset, I think, is the empowering piece of this.
Yeah, it's a learning mindset where a lot of the environments we're in are that expert mindset. So I think that's part of the mindset shift too, that this process can help drive, is just shifting from being the expert, which is necessary, to being the learner as well as the expert.
Yeah. Now, 12:59, we do have to wrap up here. So, Bhakti, to your point, this is the framework, the 3 steps: sharing the problem, getting all the elements of the dilemma on the table, sharing that sense of what does good look like, what's our collective light on the hill, and then together learning our way forward from, we're in this messy dilemma to this fabulous mythical light on the hill that we would like to get to. So that's really all we wanted to cover today. Just a quick note about our next one. We'll be going deeper into this dilemma piece, and we'll be sharing a couple of tools that allow us to do some of that unpacking. So March 24th, hope to see you there. But meanwhile, happy to stay on, and I might just stop that sharing and happy to have you.
Just a question in chat was the one about people do see the light on the hill very differently. I think that's one of the real values of that conversation around the dilemma and the light on the hill, is to acknowledge that it's not necessarily about agreeing, it's getting a sense of how people are seeing it, because it's the richness of that vision that actually helps guide you forward, not the agreement on the answer. So I think, again, the light on the hill is a bit of a trap for, it's not the light on the hill, it's how people see it. and it's guiding you forward, and it's not about agreement. And I think sometimes when I've tried to get people to agree, that actually reduces the richness of what people are doing. So I encourage you to live with a little bit of ambiguity around both the dilemma and the light on the hill.
Yeah, that's interesting, John. It makes me always remember that we're collaborating for a reason, and the reason we need all to be in the room together is because we all see these things differently. If we all saw it the same, then we don't need to be working together. You know, there's one of us could probably deal with it. But because there's diversity, that's why we need to be in the room, and that diversity is the strength of having us there. So it's not about levering us into agreement. It's about celebrating the difference, because that's where the creativity comes from.
Thanks all.
Any questions?
Yeah.
Any other? Feel free to unmute and just have a yak from this point. Otherwise, we'll see you in a month.